Okay, great. The session is being recorded. Welcome, folks. Thanks for hanging in relative to our little snafu up front. That's what every time there's something that goes on with this technology. Can you all hear me? That's what's most important right now. Can you hear me as we get started in talking about developing the art of establishing the coaching agreement? Thanks for coming. It's always interesting to develop these webinars because it usually starts in Stacy's brain with an idea, and she wanted to talk about working agreements and basically what I heard was extending the working agreement that we talked about in Recovery Coach Academy for those of you who have attended, and being able to bring that working agreement into our work, our important work with recoveries. I certainly use working agreements throughout the course of my efforts to help, and I'm talking about even before I started doing Recovery Coach Academy. For me, there was a working agreement that I developed when I first worked with adolescents because it got their attention, but it also gave them a sense of where we were headed and how we were going to head there. So I would hope that what we engage in today and what you hear today will offer you an opportunity to truly begin to develop your own art of establishing the working agreement. Um, I don't offer a lot of details aside from helping, maybe offering you some questions that will help you to wonder how this art will be developed. But clearly, as we move along, ask for what you need. There are no questions that aren't helpful. I'm here to learn as much as you might. I'm clearly interested in what you want and what you need, and so we'll move along in that process. So again, welcome to Developing the Art of Establishing the Coaching Agreement. As we get started, reminder of what we're working with. When you look at the science of coaching recovery, you learn that in Recovery Coach Academy. We learn how to actively listen. We learn about the spectrum of attitudes. Do we treat people as recipients, objects, or resources? We talked about what is recovery, what is recovery coach. We talked about the stages of recovery, stages of change. We looked at cultural responsiveness, motivational questioning helps us with asking helpful questions and asking good questions, but also helping us to help recoveries to help themselves. Self-care, recovery capital planning, skills and strategies that support the science are all important pieces. If you look at it, what we're really talking about is the science is what to do. As we develop this science, and I think, for me, these webinars offer an opportunity to continue to think about taking this science and what to do with it. And if you see the intersection of the two circles is wonder, and that's what I want you to do. I want you to wonder, how am I going to work with recoveries to develop? I started to call them contracts, but I like the word agreement better. To work with them on agreements that we can get together and work on to do their valuable work of recovery. So that art is really how to do it, and the questioning and the wondering of how to do it. And so as we go through this webinar and that wondering comes up, feel free to type it out. Feel free to put it on a piece of chat, and I'll respond as information comes through to me. Road to recovery. When you saw this in Recovery Coach Academy, it was words. And this is one of my favorite diagrams. These are the fundamental components of recovery. It begins with the recoveries having self-direction. It's individualized and person-centered. It's a process of empowerment. It's holistic, meaning that it's physical, mental, social, emotional, spiritual, and vocational. It's nonlinear, which means that it doesn't go in a straight line. It goes up and down and all around. It's strength-based, which is different than weakness or disease-based. It's responsibility, and we talk today about coaching recovery and developing a working agreement for coaching recovery. We're looking at what is the responsibility that I have as a recovery coach in the process, but also engaging the recovery in a process of identifying what their responsibilities are and what they are willing to accept, being able to respond to the work that we're doing. It's peer supported, it's hope, it's respect. And I love this diagram because it really gives us a sense of what we're talking about. We're talking about a pathway of recovery in work with recovery. So I put this up front so we think about what's the context and the context of the work that we're doing in an effort to develop an agreement to do the work. Any questions that come up, feel free to put them down. Otherwise, I'll just move along. But anytime I see a question or a comment, I'll respond to it. So let's talk about developing the art of establishing the coaching agreement, and versus calling them learning objectives, I want to posit them as questions. The more I do recovery coaching, and the more, especially that I do Recovery Coach Academy, I find myself constantly in the mode of being curious and wondering, which produces questions. So these are the questions I want us to think about as we move through this particular webinar. What's the importance of the coaching agreement to the recovery coach recovery partnership? What makes this an important work to develop and to do? What are the benefits that you perceive of coaching, of the coaching agreement to the recovery coach or recovery partnership? And there's that word I'm introducing. I'm talking about this being a partnership. And how do we engage in partnerships? How do we define partnerships? How do we act out and act in partnerships is a key component of this work. What are the issues that might be addressed or documented in the coaching or working agreement? What are we going to make agreements around? What are we going to make agreements towards? And again, how will we make these agreements? And what are the roles and responsibilities of the recovery coach in this partnership, which is key? As well as what are the responsibilities of the recovery in this partnership? And again, folks, these are all questions that I posit in that session where we're developing the coaching agreement. It's interesting, when I look through what I'm offering you to think about, not one of these pages would I hesitate to share with a recovery. Because if it's truly a partnership, I want them to know what I know, and I want to know what they know. And at some level, we come together and we become mutually vulnerable, mutually accepting, mutually attending to the process as it unfolds in our relationship as that unfolds as well. So when we're talking about partnership, we're talking about a relationship that's being built around mutual interest, around mutual focus, that I believe I benefit from as well as the recovery benefits from. And it's all for me. When I think about partnership, I'm a learner, I'm a doer, and I'm a teacher. And that puts me in the mode of paying attention to what has heart and meaning for the recovery. Because this isn't about me, it's about the recovery. So as I think about these questions that help me to think about developing the coaching agreement, it's critical to think about partnership and the recovery's needs. When you talk about recovery coach roles, this is what we've learned. We're motivators and cheerleaders. We're allies and confidants. We're truth tellers. We're co-problem solvers. We're resource brokers. We're lifestyle consultants. We're community organizers and connectors. We're advocates, big A, advocates, small a. We're friends and companions, and we're role models and mentors. Again, folks, recoveries see this image. Recoveries are exposed to this image. Recoveries are exposed to not only this image, but they're also exposed to definitions of my role and my function in working with them. My role and my function in working with them is to be a motivator and a cheerleader that believes in their capacity for change, that makes a humble effort to motivate, encourage, and celebrate their change process. As an ally and confident, I am assuring the recovery that I will be loyal, I will care for them, I will actively listen to them, I will be stable and consistent in our relationship in an effort to model that as well as an effort to encourage the same in them. And in many ways, I'm working towards being trustworthy. And my trustworthiness is a piece of what I think the value of developing a working agreement up front, helping the recovery to see that it's about them, it's not about me, and that I'm going to identify what my end of this relationship or partnership is and encourage them to do the same. I'm a truth teller in providing honest and helpful information. I offer suggestions. I help to identify the patterns of the behavior. I don't sugarcoat things with recoveries. And again, folks, I'm sharing this with recoveries. I'm going to offer my life as an example of helping living for you as a recovery. I'm going to show you how I'm going to walk the talk. I'm going to provide stage appropriate information and education as we move along in this process so that you are informed of what the process might look like and some of the ways you may gain avenues into and around that process. As a problem solver, I'm a co-problem solver. I help you to identify problem areas. I help you as a recovery to problem solve. I don't tell you as a recovery the right way, but I help you as a recovery with options. I'm not judging. As a co-creative problem solver, I will tell the recovery the truth without blaming or judging. And in that lack of blaming and judging, I will give myself the same courtesy. I'm not going to judge or blame myself um, in relation to the work that we're doing. This is our work. As a resource broker, I would provide linkages to the recovery community, treatment, and other supports. I will make you aware that I know the system of care and how to navigate that system of care to make the easiest opportunity for you. But I also appreciate in this process that you're probably a decent resource broker yourself as a person in recovery because you've utilized the resources. You've been exposed to the resources. At some level, you've heard about the resources through your own experience or experience of the people that you know. And you, like myself, have established contacts and recovery partnerships in the community. And again, my role in working with a recovery and working with you is to offer you feedback on recovery lifestyle as I understand it. As your recovery lifestyle unfolds, as we have conversations that matter about your recovery lifestyle, that I would hope you would share with me so that we can gain understanding of where you're going, how you're getting there. I'm going to constantly ask you, how's that working for you? I'm going to constantly ask you, how's that working for you? Not in the context of judging you or blaming you or in any way dispiriting you, but in an effort to help you to think about is what I'm doing moving me towards what I want to do and where I want to go. And clearly, our focus will be on recovery and wellness. We're going to discuss healthy options. I'll leave it to your treaters, your therapists, your treatment experiences to help you identify your ways beyond the addiction. As a recovery coach, I'm focusing on empowerment, your strengths, and your ability and willingness to move forward. So again, folks, this is information that recoveries walk away with. They get a sense of what my role is. In getting a sense of what my role is, I also ask them, what do you want or need to be or do to complement this role? And complement means add to it. How do you add to my ability to help you? When you get a sense of what my role is and how I may play out my role, I want you to think about what do you need from me? What aspects of my roles and functions are most critical to your process of moving forward. And again, this is something we talk about as we develop our work agreement, but it's an ongoing conversation. As I think about it, our working agreement, our coaching agreement really is a dynamic document. We can add to it over time as what comes up comes up. I think that's critical to thinking about it because if it's about the recovery, it's not about me. As their life unfolds, as their recovery unfolds, or if their recovery folds up, it's critical for us to be paying attention to what's heart and meaning for them, paying attention to what's going on with them versus me having a rote sense of where we're going. In many ways, the way to wisdom, the way to learn how we can work together is being open to the outcomes of our efforts and not attached to it. Again, the flexibility, the dynamic nature of the working or coaching agreement lends itself to being one that's not stuck in the mud, but one that moves along as the process moves along. Any questions or comments thus far? Again, if they come up, write them down and I will respond. Can't move forward without introducing what I perceive to be the fundamentals of my work. As a recovery coach, facilitator of Recovery Coach Academy, as a person, as a grandfather, as a father, in all my relationships, I find to this stool is in my head. What that means is that I'm constantly thinking about, am I actively listening? And in my actively listening, what am I curious about? What don't I understand? What do I wonder? And then in identifying through my active listening, my curiosity and my wonderment, that builds good questions for me. And in building those good questions, I'm constantly also appreciative of what my stuff is and my ability to discover that stuff. I think that's the biggest challenge of recovery, and I think it's the biggest challenge of being a helper is, the ongoing process of discovering and managing our stuff. I clearly believe that discovering and managing our stuff falls in line with managing and naming our stress and our stressors and our challenges and being honest about them. Um, and this is what I must and I need to model to recoveries because in many ways, I'm treating recoveries as resources. And in treating them as resources, I am modeling and demonstrating to them an opportunity for them to do the same in their lives. I'm constantly encouraging people in recovery to appreciate the fact that we can treat the people in our lives as resources. We can actively listen to them. We can ask good questions of them. But clearly, the willingness to listen and to model that behavior is the willingness to build the best relationships that we can. So, again, much like coaches coaching coaches, in coaching recoveries, I'm coaching them also in relation to their roles as parents. I'm coaching them, especially as in their roles as partners in other relationships that they have. It's this whole learning, doing, teaching process that I'm constantly reinforcing. So when you look at the Recovery Coach Academy fundamentals stool, this is a responsibility of the recovery as well as the recovery coach. And again, recoveries get this model. We talk about this model. Um, some of their agreements will contain their willingness to practice this model and how they will practice it. But again, I want this to be in their heads. How do I listen? How do I ask good questions in response to my wonderment or my confusion? And in my confusion, am I truly discovering and managing my stuff? And I would hope that part of discovering and managing their stuff comes out in our conversations. And those conversations might lead to their ability to get the support that they need that might be beyond my lane. You have this in your Recovery Coach Academy participants manual. I just bring it to the fore because I want us to think about as we build relationships, as we build these agreements with recoveries. I'm hoping that we'll constantly focus on building relationships versus what I know I did so well in the past, destroying relationships. And when we talk about building relationships, it's an effort to seek unity and peace of mind. And isn't that what we want to share with recoveries? Serenity, a sense of self, a sense of harmony, balance, justice, integrity, focusing on solutions, focusing on how we all can win, focusing on being a love seeker versus a fault finder, focusing on looking at what's right with people, organizations, relationships versus predicting the negative, which we did so well. Spiritual values, honesty, open mindedness, willing to care, respecting, managing the care, seeking out and putting care into our relationships. Forgiving is unconditional. A focus on others to see and discover the good in them. I do that as a coach. I do that as a facilitator of the Recovery Coach Academy process. And I encourage recoveries to do it as well. Why? Because at the base of that, we're building collaborative and cooperative families, partnerships in particular that promote wellness. And I want to promote wellness. I want recoveries to practice wellness. So the ability to help them to appreciate how do we build relationships that encourage and help us to collaborate and cooperate in a wellness practice can be brand new information. And many times people may need help through that. So again, the initial discussions around helping recoveries to see what they need. And again, this is a document that they have an opportunity to look at and think about. Recovery coaching, recovery responsibilities. Much like the stool, we are responsible, the recovery and I, to building the best relationship that we can build. And this offers some parameters, some guidelines, some structure, a framework for what a healthy relationship might look like as they try to function in the dysfunction of the world. Developing the art of establishing the coaching agreement. Think about what is the importance of the coaching agreement to the recovery coach recovery partnership. I've come to believe that it's important because it's an opportunity for the recovery coach and the recovery to co-create their coaching relationship. I mean, think about it. How many times in the course of living through an addiction has a person really been in power and in control of the ability to manage and change their lives? The ability to sit with a person who cares about them and who offers an opportunity to problem solve with them is a very powerful opportunity. And I want recoveries to appreciate what that opportunity is so they take full advantage of it. It's an opportunity for the recovery coach and recovery to identify and understand their expectations about the recovery coaching relationship, the goals, and the activity of that relationship. If we don't have a plan, if we don't have a vision of where we're going, and if we don't talk about that vision of where we're going and where the recovery wants this process to lead, we may get lost. And clearly, the direction is left to the recovery. The importance is appreciating the recovery coaching is not therapy. The establishment of the coaching agreement will help create proper expectations for recovery coaching. It clearly helps the recovery to know what my lane is, but also clearly helps me as a recovery coach to describe my lane, and at some level, giving an opportunity / permission for the recovery to help me to stay there. And that's a piece of me being vulnerable in the process, but I think it's a critical piece of the power that the recovery deserves in this relationship. They deserve the best of my recovery coaching science and art, and that is weakened when I step out of my lane. Know your role, know your road, stay in your lane. The question is, as a recovery coach, my role is, the road is, I stay in my lane by. That's constantly going through my head, much like the three-legged stool. I'm constantly thinking about what my role is and what my role isn't. Gosh, folks, I've been doing this work for 38 years, i.e. substance abuse counselor, social worker, research clinician, and which has all evolved over the last 8 or 9 years since I've been co-facilitating the Recovery Coach Academy. My role as recovery coach has become clearer, and yet there are still times I may trip over my old counseling and my old therapist and my old research clinician role. And thank goodness I have conversations that matter about people that know. For example, I had a discussion with Phil about staying in the lane, and for me, I found myself appreciating his comment that, as a recovery coach, it's clear that we're out of our lane when we're talking about issues of the past with recoveries. Sometimes I might think too much about those because that's just the nature of how I thought about helping in the past. So, you always have to pay attention to staying in one's lane and pay attention to the feedback that we get from other people. That's why when you talk about whether it's supervision, whether it's, performance support, for me, any collaborative effort where I get honest with other people who know recovery coaching and are doing recovery coaching can be helpful for me to be able to be and do what I need to be and do, as I know my role, I know my road, and I stay in my lane. And again, sharing this with recoveries is an opportunity for them to appreciate what my limitations are, which helps them to get a clearer sense of what their expectations of our relationship and what I bring to that relationship are. And it also helps them to think about what their lane might be. That'd be an interesting prospect to canvas or to identify with recoveries. What do they perceive to be their own lane in accepting help? Maybe a future webinar. Developing the art of establishing the coaching agreement. What are the benefits of establishing a coaching agreement in the partnership? Negotiating the coaching agreement will provide us with information about both the recovery and the coach. This piece really intrigues me because it is so true. It's really in the line of being a learner, a doer, and a teacher. That speaks to humility. Humility says, I don't know what I don't know, and I am willing to be open to learning it. And much of what I don't know is who that person who I am helping is and how they think and what they feel. You know, the power and the importance of the building the relationship and the power and the importance of developing an agreement that enhances the quality of and the ability to practice this relationship is very helpful information. So negotiating the contract agreement will provide us with information about myself as well as the recovery. For example, is the recovery able to ask for what they need or want in the relationship as we're looking at the coaching agreement? And is the recovery coach able to do the same? Do I defer too much to the recovery? And in deferring too much to the recovery, am I weakening my own boundaries, or am I weakening what I perceive my own limits or limitations relative to helping in the process? Again, I need to be clear about what I'm bringing to the table as I engage the recovery in a discussion around what they want brought to the table and what they will bring and how they will bring it. Does the recovery push the boundaries as much as possible? How does the recovery's pushing the boundaries affect you as the coach? And do you hold your boundary or do you give in? Or, we talk about the boundaries being elastic, and yet we don't want them to break or burst as a result of our trying to please the recovery versus pleasing ourselves as well. Pay attention as you do this work of establishing a coaching agreement, because that's what this is about. Negotiating the contract, identifying how the negotiation is occurring, is offering valuable information on what this relationship is beginning to look like. So pay attention to what assumptions you make about the recovery based upon your discussing and negotiating the coaching agreement. Again, as I was doing the research for this is a very powerful point that I hadn't thought a whole lot about. Even though I think a lot about learning, doing, and teaching, it's critical. I mean, again, the true benefit, the true value of working to establish this coaching agreement is that you learn more about each other. And again, there are many times when I've just stopped the process and spoke to recoveries about what we're learning as we move along, what they're learning about me. What are they learning about what they perceive this relationship to be? Those are all very powerful opportunities for people to look at what's going on and how it's going on. I put this one in because this has been a real foundation of the work that I do. I believe I'm going to be involved in the Multiple Pathways of Recovery conference this year through Phil's invitation. And I'm going to present what I call care recovery. And for me, care recovery is one word that basically describes much of my personal and professional pathway. And it's really unique in the sense that everyone's is unique. But mine really was based in this concept of care. And I know a lot of it came from this particular piece from Inside the Addictive Personality by Craig Knockin, which is a book I read back in the 70s. Recovery involves, and again, I shared this with recoveries. Recovery involves having an honest and caring relationship with self and others. Many times as we're looking at the working agreement and we're looking at the counseling agreement, I'm reminding and inquiring around the recovery's ability and willingness to be honest and have caring relationships with themselves and with me. I mean, it's an onset of a process that's critical, having honest and caring relationships with self and others. It's about recovery in balance, harmony, and serenity. When we looked at that piece relative to building relationships, that's a key piece of building relationships, as is the ability to be mutually vulnerable. Not only am I asking the recovery to be vulnerable in the process, but I'm asking myself, I need to be vulnerable as well. I need to appreciate what my strengths, what my queries are, what my questions are. Accepting that we're limited in our control, but in the limitations of our control, we can be stronger and have greater opportunity to demonstrate care if we come together. From me, much of that, the partnership that I believe is critical to identify and document and plan for through the coaching agreement is accepting that we're limited in our control, and yet with that limitation, we need each other. Recovery involves self-responsibility. It involves care and caring. It involves surrender versus control. And the surrender versus control pieces that I find that when I'm afraid, I try to control the uncontrollable. And when I'm moving from a place of care and love, I can pay attention with heart and meaning for myself and another human being a lot better, which in many ways is a process of acceptance and as well as validation that's critical. Recovery involves negotiation versus manipulation. What better opportunity to help a recovery to think about and learn through this process of negotiation versus limitation by engaging them in a process of developing an agreement for the work that they and I will be doing. I always remind people that negotiation and manipulation have similar pieces to them. The same skills that I use to manipulate, I find myself using to negotiate. And so there's a transition, there's a potential transformation that's readily available if we choose to utilize it. And I remind recoveries of this. And when I think about care recovery, and again, that's my own personal and professional pathway of recovery over the last 30 odd years, it's really about turning my life over to care. And this comes from Notkin's work. He says, turn our will and our lives over to care. Third step of 12-step recovery helps us to appreciate making a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood God. It's not that I don't believe in the God stuff. It's about the ability to focus where I need to focus on self-care and other care. When I turn my life over to care, I allow myself to be vulnerable. I allow myself to be in a position that I am okay with you caring about me. And again, that's what I offer as I make an effort for recoveries to think about this concept and to practice this concept in our work. And again, I introduce it up front as a part of the agreement that we have for the coaching, so they have full disclosure, total transparency relative to where I'm coming from when I talk about recovery. And I encourage them to do the same through conversations that matter with me or with other people. Developing the art of establishing a coaching agreement. What are the issues that might be addressed or documented in a coaching or working agreement activity that you would engage in with recovery? Description, a description of what the work is. I use a description of how I think about the work. I think about the work that recovery coaching, and again, I share this with recoveries. Recovery coaching is a partnership between the recovery coach and recovery that offers a thought-provoking and co-creative process that inspires the recovery to maximize personal growth and change. That's my own description, definition of what I am as a coach. The key words being partnership, and I'm a thought provoker. I've always been a thought provoker, and thoughts have always provoked me to move forward. So I do that as a major piece of the work that I do in helping others. And being a thought provoker is an opportunity to get people to think about things in a way they may not have thought about them before. And the ability to help people to think about things in a way that they have not thought about them before, and then share that and be vulnerable in sharing that, is an opportunity to build trust. It's an opportunity to build partnership. It's an opportunity to lend a language to the work that we're doing. And again, this is a part of the coaching working agreement that I want us to think about. Responsibilities, whether it be the recovery coach responsibilities or the recovery's responsibilities. And maybe there's a third party that has responsibilities, outside, but truly a part of the agreement. Maybe a part of the agreement speaks to probation or parole officer activity or family participation or not. What are the responsibilities? Let's lay them out. Description of the work, responsibilities attached to the work, the services. How will the recovery coach and recovery agree to engage in their work? Will it be face-to-face, one-to-one sessions? Will we Skype the work? Emails, looking at the technology that's so available to us. I do a lot of my work now with adolescents is through text messaging and sending them figures and having them think about what they think about. So the services, how are we going to do this thing? How are we going to, how are we going to service this particular relationship? Procedure, the time of the coaching meetings, locations, telephone protocol. These are all pieces we want to talk about so that we're on the same page. Issues that might be addressed or documented in the working agreement. Confidentiality, speak to what the confidentiality rules are. Speak to what my confidentiality boundaries are, and helping the recovery to know that and asking for any questions they may have relative to that and being able to document that in the coaching agreement. And anything else you might think is applicable to your individual case with a recovery who, is special unto themselves. Because I wrote to recovery map again, for me, this is an image that I've used dozens of times to demonstrate lots of thinking. But again, it's an opportunity to think about where this recovery is heading. And they get this picture, and they think about this picture. And if nothing else, it gives them a picture of what I think this picture represents. Addiction focuses on the dis-ease and the limitations, whereas recovery focuses on empowerment and self-awareness and opportunities for change and growth and transformation that are built upon these principles that we learned in Recovery Coach Academy. The issue becomes, again, much like the science that we look at, how do we help recoveries through this process? How prepared are you to coach a road to care and recovery is the question as you think about this. How willing and committed are you to strengthening and supporting a way of living care and recovery? And not only do I ask myself this question as the coach, but again, this image is presented to the recovery and ask them, how prepared are you to strengthen and practice a way of living care and recovery? And much of what unfolds in our conversations that matter, much of what unfolds is I actively listen and I wonder and I am curious and I respond to that wonderment and that curiosity by asking good questions while managing and discovering my stuff and truly appreciating the resource that the recovery presents in our humble effort to learn power to engage the recovery in a recovery process. Those are all part of the thinking. But that thinking revolves around the recovery's perception of where they're going and how they're going to get there. It's individual, person-centered. That first marker is self-direction. I follow that direction. It's a humble effort to lead pathways, is what I perceive this enterprise that I'm engaging with and introducing recoveries to. And again, this is a part of helping them to hear where we're going and how we're going to get there. In the process, I'm a care ally. And in the process, I have the expectation that the recovery will be a care ally as well. When I talk about care recovery, it's turning my life over to care. And the ability to turn my life over to care is to be aware of my power and the recovery's power. Be aware of being culture responsive, i.e. appreciating the culture and the cultures to which the recovery belongs to, and making sure that I'm not offending any of those cultures, discounting any of those cultures, and at some level as much as possible, being inclusive relative to what the cultures that the recovery experiences are. I'm able to respond, which is my responsibility. I'm respectful. I acknowledge my privilege, which is really perhaps the differentiation of our power in the relationship, but I don't abuse that power. The privilege that I have had is relative to the privilege of being in a process of recovering that I want to share that privilege. I'm realistic and I'm supportive. And as I engage recovery in this process, I share this image with them as well and ask them how will they respond to being a care ally in support of my effort to care for and care about them. It's a mutually vulnerable and it's a mutually supportive relationship, i.e. partnership, that we want to able to talk about up front and at some level agree on how we'll get this done. Just giving you a broad stroke picture so that you can focus in on how you might follow through. Stages and occupations of recovery are introduced as a part of the process just to get a recovery familiar with what might be some of the tasks, the occupations, the activities, and the actions that I would be engaging in as I move through my way of recovery. We might talk about some of these up front so that the recovery has a sense of, okay, how do I do this and what support will I need to do this and how will I talk about this? Stage one is the clear focus, stabilization. And I'll send the recovery away after the first session with this particular document, asking them to identify where their strengths and their assets or their weaknesses and their limitations in leading a stable life in recovery, i.e. practicing stabilization. That offers input and information and descriptions of what the work is, and not overwhelming them with taking on 9 of those tasks, but identifying which of those tasks best fits where they are. And again, that might be a goal or a smart objective of their coaching agreement. Again, giving a recovery a lot of information about where we might go and how we might get there so they can make an informed choice about the process that they and I will engage in to get there. This is a piece that I developed way before I engaged in recovery coaching. However, it demonstrates the evolution of my own efforts to help and provide care. Empower You for me is a vehicle that I use to engage people, and in this sense, recovery is in a process of personal development and personal growth. It's a shift in paradigm on how I provide help and care. And I offer it now just to give you a sense of, again, this is a descriptor that I use in help and recovery to think about what my role, what my responsibility is in the relationship, in the partnership, and how they might engage me in that and how they might align with that role. The shift in paradigm is from a focus on problems to a focus on solutions. The shift in paradigm is from a focus on weakness and limitations to a focus on strengths and assets. It's a shift from a focus on illness and dis-ease, i.e. the addiction, to a focus on wellness, health, care, and recovery. It's a shift from the helpee or the recovery as a recipient or an object of my help to the helpee or the recovery as a resource in the help process. It's a shift from treatment, care as a service, to a help partnership where care is both a service as well as an attitude. It's a shift from programs and professionals to a help process where we co-create solutions with the people seeking help. It's a shift from incidental strengths and assets or recovery capital development to intentional strengths and assets and recovery capital development. It's a shift from judgment and blame to personal responsibility and accountability. It's a shift from competition to collaboration. It's a shift from results and outcome based to process and progress based. We're open to the outcomes, but not attached to the outcome. The process is the more critical piece that we look at. It's a shift from domination on the part of the helper to partnering and partnership on the part of the helper. And it's a shift clearly from fear of failure to faith in the help process. Again, this has been very helpful. And again, it's helpful to share this because they get a sense of where I'm coming from. And in getting a sense of where I'm coming from, I get a sense of how where I'm coming from is met by or identified by or interested by them. Framework for culture responsive help partnering. Again, I'm giving you an opportunity to think about how we help in partnerships. And this is developing the art of help partnerships, as I call it. And it comes from my work in cultural responsiveness, a very powerful framework. And again, I share this with recovery because I want them to know the inclusiveness, the there's nothing to hide here. This is what I am and this is what I do. And your ability to embrace what I am and what I do is our ability to partner in a process to help you through. So we establish inclusion, that means respect and connectedness. We establish competence, which means authenticity and effectiveness. We establish an attitude of choice and personal relevance for the recovery, and meaning is a challenge and engagement. We establish inclusion by routines and rituals, respectful interactions with the recovery. The recoveries are comfortable, their resources, their life, language, and cultures are respected. We stimulate their competence by clear criteria for success, which might be a clear part of the coaching agreement as well. Fairness and honesty, being recovery centered, being recovery driven, reality based action, multiple pathways to solutions, creating a belief that recoveries are effective learners and doers. Relative to developing a positive attitude in the relationship and the partnering is a focus on the recovery's experiences, concerns, and interests. We encourage their choices related to their experiences, values, strengths, and needs, which we discover in our conversations that matter. And we enhance meaning by actively collaborating, challenging what is, teaching to their strengths, supporting their excellence, creating challenging, thought-provoking learning and doing activities based upon their values and their cultures. It's about the recovery. It's not about me as I help to develop partnerships that will work with us and for us. This is all a part of my thinking as I think about how will we do our work, how will we document how we'll do our work, how do we agree to do our work, and documentation of that agreement so that our work has a clear focus and a clear opportunity for clarity. Whew. Thoughts, questions, comments, as well as thank you for being here. Any thoughts, or questions, or comments as we wind this down? My hope is this was helpful. I see John is typing, so let's see what we got. Thank you, Stacy. You know, you're my rock lady. You really hit my curiosity buttons all the time, and this is a shorter time to get this done, but I like what it is, and I'm going to use a lot of this to supplement and to add to what I'm already doing around my efforts to help. I know it'll be very helpful for adolescents. They love the direction, and they love the clarity of where we're going. That's a Stacy question, John. We're working in a prison. We're talking about working agreements and security aspect. Yeah, so meet the challenge, John, by having conversations that matter with the people who set up the rules and see but also help them to appreciate what your role is and how your role is best enhanced, and see if you can't come up with a mutual agreement on how the agreements can work, if that makes sense. Thank you, Stacy. Good. And hope it helps. And any help we can be, let us know. If you let Stacy know, she'll let me know. You're welcome, Thomas. Listen, folks, have a great day. Take care of yourselves as you take care of other people. Recover your care process is a critical part of this process. Turn our lives over to care is something we have to do intentionally, not incidentally. Yeah, enjoy the long weekend, folks. Be well, and Again, thanks much, Stacy. Enjoy yourself, lady.